Chapter 15. Where did you hear that? Mac asked. Nan, Doreen said. Once she heard the Huberts' name, she was all over it. And Linda, the librarian. I didn't even think of that. He groaned. He muttered away in the background, and she could hear the keys on his laptop clicking. It doesn't mean it has anything to do with the other, though, she said quietly. No, he said, but the fact that we have a dead family member, and the license plate, of course, always makes me very suspicious. Of course it does, she said. But it doesn't have to be related. Just keep that in mind. He chuckled. Isn't that my line for you? You're the one always trying to make big bad things happen out of nothing. Maybe, she said. But I have a lot to focus on right now. Speaking of which, he said, a couple buddies of mine were talking about the problem with your house. 2 of them are on patrol tonight, and they'll take a couple drive-bys once an hour while you're asleep. I think you need to take extra care for the next few days, until we get this straightened out. But they will continue to keep an eye on your place. And there'll be no charge. Just concerned citizens giving you a hand. She smiled. Thank you, she said with heartfelt sincerity. I really appreciate that. So you should, he said with a chuckle. And now you owe me one. He hung up. Into the empty room she said, Ha, you're the one getting the credit for closing all these cases, so you owe me one. And if my current theory runs true, you'll be able to close yet another one. But it was too early to crow about that. She still had a little work to do first. As such, she sat down and continued to read the articles on Oceanic. The company was out of Washington. She frowned, realizing it was already past business hours, and she couldn't contact them tonight. But she sent an email, asking if they had done the study on Okanagan Lake within the last few years. She'd forgotten to ask Nan for the year this was done, and Weatherman hadn't mentioned it either. She rewrote the email so it didn't mention a year. Just any of their research with imaging on the lake itself. Once she sent that off, she was done for the moment. She had so much stuff in progress that her head was spinning. At that moment, Goliath jumped onto her lap and insisted on a cuddle. She groaned, gratefully sank back into the couch, pushing away from her laptop, and just held him for a moment. But he wouldn't have any of that. He kept butting his head against her chin. Did I forget to feed you again? She whispered. She could hear little meows in her ear. Well, it wasn't just you I forgot to feed. I didn't get any lunch either. She got up and went to check the animals' food supplies, and sure enough, all of them were out of food. As soon as Muggs heard her grab the dog food bag, he came running. She served him a generous portion, realizing the bag itself was getting a little low. Muggs, we need money, she said. Muggs barked, as if agreeing. She fed Thaddeus and gave Goliath a can of soft food. If nothing else, guys, we'll get paid if we work for Mac tomorrow. Thanks to Mac. That should help us a lot. It wouldn't be much but enough for her to get a few more groceries, or alternatively get food for the animals. Depending on her own food supply as to which one would come first. Then she remembered the money she had in the bowl upstairs. When she had removed the pile of clothing to bring the chair down to show to Fen Gunderson, she'd put the clothing on top of the bowl, so it would be hidden when the appraiser was here. She wanted to just have a bath and chill for the evening. But she wasn't at all sure about sleeping tonight. She needed it, she was really exhausted. She also needed some food. She went through her cupboards again and found it would be either cheese and crackers, which sounded deplorable because she was tired of the same foods, or a hot bowl of ramen. That one hands down. With yet another bowl of ramen while the darkness settled outside, she propped chairs up against the inside of the front and back doors, leaving a light on downstairs so others would think she was still up. She closed the curtains to project just a glimmer of light outside, and headed upstairs. She kept her bedroom light on low as she looked at the big bed, wondering at the centuries, well, at least the decades of use it had had. Nan, you did a hell of a job taking care of this for your grandmother. You knew where it came from. And you wanted it to go to me, even if I sold it. That's huge for me. It is so huge. On that thought, she wondered if the provenance folder was somewhere in this room. She looked under the bed, dismissed the night tables which weren't even big enough for a folder, then she opened the closet doors and groaned. As soon as she did that, everything came cascading forward. She still had yet to get through even 10% of the closet's contents. Stacks of clothing remained everywhere. This is a major job, she said to the animals. But hey, we're up for it. The payout is incredible. She prepped herself for bed and hopped in. As she lay here thinking about the years and years that people had slept on this very spot, it made her smile. Something was so very comforting about that. The thought that she was sleeping on thousands of dollars was less than comforting. She'd become cavalier about money when she had lived with her husband. Since she didn't get money, or so he said, he took care of the finances. She resided among so much opulence, but she had no idea of the costs or the brand names or where it all came from. A brand new piece from a store or a family heirloom handed down? None of that had really occurred to her. Realizing that the bed she was now on probably was worth more money than her marital bed just astounded her. Her husband had been all about how much money he had spent on their furnishings, impressing himself more than Doreen. She would cheerfully have traded it in for a regular bed, and used the money to help somebody in need. She hadn't realized how many people were in need until she became one of them.